Man melted alive. Hisashi Aochi arrived at work expecting another routine day handling uranium fuel, but one mistake inside the JCO facility turned him into the center of one of the most infamous radiation accidents in modern history. Safety rules had been ignored for months, and shortcuts became so normal that even dangerous steps felt ordinary. When Uchi poured a uranium solution into the wrong tank, a bright flash burst through the room like lightning trapped indoors. That single moment exposed him to more radiation than almost any person had ever survived. At first, he felt only heat and nausea, but doctors soon realized the damage went far beyond his skin. His chromosomes were shattered, his immune system collapsed, and his body no longer had the ability to heal. Bandages became his only layer of protection, but every change ripped away more flesh, fluids leaked faster than they could be replaced, and machines kept him alive long after his organs began shutting down. Each day revealed another problem no one had seen before, and the medical team struggled against injuries that simply kept worsening. His story became a chilling reminder of how one mistake can reshape an entire life. But the next case shows suffering in an entirely different form. 40 Days of Hell. Junko Furuta was heading home after work when she crossed paths with a group of boys who wanted power more than anything else. What began as a simple encounter spiraled into a nightmare that lasted 40 days inside a quiet suburban home where no one stepped in to save her. She was threatened, isolated, and controlled with lies about what would happen to her family if she tried to escape. Every day, the abuse escalated as the group realized no one would challenge them. Her injuries mounted until walking became impossible, and even basic tasks left her in agony. She hid her suffering behind forced phone calls, hoping someone might sense something was wrong, but fear kept her trapped. Even the adults in the house ignored the situation, choosing silence over confrontation. By the end, she endured more pain than most people could imagine, and the cruelty of her captors shocked an entire country once the truth emerged. Her story reveals how danger can hide in plain sight, but the next section shows what happens when danger comes from an entire empire, turning on its own ruler. Torn apart emperor. When Emperor Andronikos I Komnenos rose to power, he promised to reform the Byzantine Empire by cutting corruption and reducing the influence of wealthy elites. At first, the public celebrated his strict approach, seeing him as a leader who finally stood up to an untouchable class. But his methods grew harsher, and suspicion replaced trust as he began punishing anyone he believed might betray him. Meanwhile, foreign threats closed in, and the fall of a major city turned public opinion sharply against him. His fate was sealed when a member of his own family killed an arresting officer, shifting support away from the emperor almost instantly. Crowds seized Andronikos as he tried to flee, and what followed became one of the most brutal public deaths in medieval history. For 3 days, he was mutilated, beaten, and dragged through the streets while onlookers unleashed their fury by the end. He was hung upside down and attacked again until he finally succumbed. The violence was so intense that chroniclers struggled to describe it. His downfall showed how quickly power can collapse when fear outweighs loyalty. But the next case shows a man who never even had a chance to defend himself. History's first shark attack. 3,400 years ago, a Jomon hunter in coastal Japan entered the water for what should have been a routine fishing trip. He had no way of knowing he would become the earliest confirmed victim of a shark attack in human history. His remains were discovered in 2021 with almost 800 deep V-shaped wounds carved into his bones, including bite marks that removed entire limbs. Researchers first thought he had been attacked with metal weapons, but once they examined the pattern of injuries, the truth became clear. A large tiger shark or great white ambushed him, tearing through his arms, chest, and legs with terrifying force. The wounds showed signs of defensive struggle, meaning he was alive and fighting as the shark dragged him under. Yet his body was found buried properly, which means others were with him and pulled him from the water after the attack. They tried to give him the dignity they could, even though he was long past saving. His discovery proved how dangerous ancient waters could be, but the next section reveals a death so deliberate and painful that even hardened samurai would have recoiled. Boiled father and son. Ishikawa Gomen lived during a turbulent era in Japan where samurai and warlords fought for control, and legends often blurred with reality. Some portrayed him as a ninja, others as a rebellious outlaw who stole from the powerful and gave to the poor. Whatever the truth, his decision to target a major ruler sealed his fate. After sneaking into a castle to attempt an assassination, he accidentally alerted guards and was captured before he reached his target. Instead of receiving the swift death typically given to samurai, Gomen was sentenced to be boiled alive in a public execution designed to terrify anyone who dared challenge authority. The punishment was even harsher because his young son was forced into the cauldron with him. As the water heated, Gomen lifted his child above his head, trying desperately to protect him from the rising heat. Some accounts claim sympathetic onlookers saved the boy, while others state that Gomen, realizing no rescue would come, ended his suffering himself to spare him a slower death. His final act became one of the most infamous moments in Japanese folklore. But the next story shifts to a tragedy that changed an entire nation. Murder that sparked change. Emmett Till traveled from Chicago to Mississippi, expecting a normal summer with family, unaware that a brief encounter inside a small grocery store would set off one of the most defining cases of the civil rights era. After an accusation from the store owner's wife, her husband and his half-brother stormed into Till's great-uncle's home at night and took the 14-year-old boy away. He was beaten severely, his injuries so severe that even his face became unrecognizable. The attackers tied a heavy metal fan around his neck with barbed wire and ended his life before dumping him into a river. When his body was recovered, his mother made the courageous decision to hold an open casket funeral so the world could see what had been done to her son. The brutality shocked millions and exposed the deep injustice of the era. Despite overwhelming evidence, the killers were acquitted after a brief trial and later admitted what they had done. Till's death became a spark that fueled major movements, shaping protests, activism, and national awareness. His tragedy forced people to confront a system that had long protected violence, but the next section returns us to a punishment designed to crush a rebellion in the cruelest way imaginable. The Iron Throne Roast. Yorgi Doza was a skilled soldier chosen to lead a crusade, but when the peasants following him realized how harshly they were treated by nobles, the mission transformed into a full rebellion. Doza became the symbol of their anger, guiding thousands who demanded better conditions. For a moment, it looked like the uprising might reshape the balance of power, but noble forces crushed the rebellion before it could spread further. After Doza was captured, his enemies wanted a punishment so terrifying that no peasant would ever consider rising again. He was seated on a throne made entirely of heated iron that scorched his skin on contact. To mock his brief leadership, they placed a burning crown on his head and forced a red-hot scepter into his hand. The suffering did not end there, as 9 starving followers were brought in and ordered to bite pieces from his burned body. Anyone who refused was cut down instantly. The display was meant to break the spirit of every future rebel, but the next section shows a different kind of endurance, one that reveals just how advanced ancient medicine could be. Impossible Stone Age surgery. 31,000 years ago, deep in the forests of Borneo, a young child suffered an injury severe enough that it threatened their life. Instead of abandoning them, someone in their community performed a surgical amputation with tools made only of sharpened stone. The precision was remarkable. The cut avoided major arteries, and the wound healed cleanly without signs of infection, something modern surgeons still struggle with in difficult conditions. The child survived into adulthood, living with a partially withered leg, but continuing to navigate rugged terrain with the help of others. The discovery stunned researchers because it proved that ancient humans possessed medical knowledge far more advanced than previously believed. Their ability to perform such a delicate operation showed careful planning, deep understanding, and a level of cooperation that gave the injured person a real chance. The skeleton also revealed signs of long-term care, proving this individual was never left behind. Their survival for years after the operation remains one of the oldest examples of community support and medical skill. It is a reminder that even in the harshest environments, people found ways to help one another. But first, only cool people are subscribed to this channel, so hit that subscribe button before we go any further. The Toilet Assassination. Edmund Ironside earned his nickname by fighting with relentless determination during one of England's most turbulent eras. As wars with Denmark dragged on, he pushed back invasion after invasion, refusing to surrender even when betrayal within his own ranks undermined him. His biggest setback came when a powerful earl switched sides in the middle of battle, forcing Edmund into a fragile peace agreement that divided the kingdom under the terms of the treaty. Whichever king died first would leave everything to the other. Weeks later, Edmund was suddenly found dead in a way so strange and humiliating that it became one of the most talked about royal deaths in medieval history. According to chroniclers, he was attacked while using the restroom. An assassin had hidden beneath the wooden seat in the privy and drove a blade upward, ending his life instantly. Another version claims a concealed crossbow was used instead, firing at a vulnerable angle. Historians debate whether these accounts are literal or exaggerated, but the rumors spread quickly at the time because the death conveniently benefited his rival. The bizarre nature of the story ensured it would never be forgotten, and what comes next involves another emperor whose downfall turned even darker: the Human Footstool. When Emperor Valerian took the Roman throne, the empire was breaking apart on multiple fronts. Plagues, invasions, and internal chaos forced him to lead armies himself, hoping to restore order before everything collapsed. His biggest challenge came from Persia, led by King Shapur, whose forces pushed deeper into Roman territory with each passing year. Valerian attempted diplomacy, negotiated truces, and even launched counterattacks, but disease weakened his troops at the worst possible moment. During the Battle of Edessa, he was captured alive, becoming the first Roman emperor to fall into enemy hands. Shapur used his captive as a living symbol of victory, forcing Valerian to kneel whenever the Persian ruler needed to mount his horse. The humiliation shocked the ancient world, and stories spread describing even harsher treatment. According to later accounts, Valerian eventually tried to buy his freedom by offering gold. Shapur responded by making him swallow molten metal, ending his life in one of the most brutal ways ever recorded. Whether every detail is literal or exaggerated, the cruelty was undeniable. His skin was said to have been stuffed like a trophy, displayed as a reminder of Persia's dominance. The next section, however, takes brutality in a very different direction. Buried alive ritual. In Neolithic France, 3 women met a fate so disturbing that researchers struggled to understand it even thousands of years later. Their remains were found in a stone silo-shaped structure that seemed intentionally designed for a ritual rather than an ordinary burial. 2 of the women were wedged into extremely tight spaces with their limbs twisted and bound, and heavy grinding stones were placed on top of them to keep them pinned. Evidence showed they were alive when the stones were lowered, trapped in complete darkness. The positions of their legs and neck suggested they were tied in ways that would eventually cause them to choke themselves as they struggled. The third woman was placed above them, unbound, almost as if she served a symbolic purpose in the ritual. The structure aligned with the solstice, which hints that this wasn't random violence, but something ceremonial. Archaeologists believe the burial was part of a sacrifice intended to protect crops or influence agricultural cycles during that era. The deliberate setup and the horrifying method made this one of the most unsettling ancient rituals ever uncovered. It raises questions about belief, fear, and desperation. And the next case moves from ritual cruelty to a mystery hidden beneath tar: the Brea Murder. Los Angeles is known for palm trees, traffic, and movie sets. But long before any of that existed, a young woman met a violent end near what is now the La Brea tar pits. Unlike the prehistoric animals that slipped into the tar by accident, this woman showed every sign of foul play. Her skull had been struck with enough force to cause fractures, and there was a small hole suggesting a sharp blow from a tool or weapon. Researchers concluded she had been attacked before her body ended up in the tar, which preserved her bones for thousands of years. What made the case even stranger was how rare human remains are at the site, especially ones with clear evidence of violence. The injury patterns indicated she was hit deliberately, not harmed by an animal, and her jaw was broken in a way consistent with interpersonal conflict. Whether she was targeted by someone in her own group or by outsiders searching for resources, her death remains a mystery. What is clear is that she became one of the earliest identified murder victims in the region. Her story shows how dangerous ancient life could be. And the next section takes us to an even harsher setting: forced to eat their leader. After Georgi Das's rebellion collapsed, the authorities wanted to make sure no one ever considered rising again. His execution became one of the most infamous displays of cruelty in European history. Once he was seated on a burning iron throne that scorched through his skin, a heated crown was placed on his head and a blazing scepter forced into his hand. But the torture didn't end with him. 9 of his starving followers were dragged forward, trembling and exhausted. Executioners used red-hot pliers to tear pieces of Doza's burned flesh and ordered the rebels to eat what had been removed. Anyone who refused was cut down instantly. turning desperation into terror. Some obeyed just long enough to stay alive, while others hesitated only for a moment before being attacked. The gruesome spectacle was designed to destroy morale and send a message to every peasant who might consider rebellion. It worked, at least in the short term, because fear spread quickly through the countryside. This horrifying event became a turning point that made future uprisings more cautious. The next section, however, moves away from deliberate cruelty and into a world shaped by natural disasters and broken survival. Drowned in the desert. The Atacama Desert is one of the driest places on Earth. But thousands of years ago, a man living on its coastline met a fate that seemed impossible for such an arid region. His bones were discovered inside a circular stone structure filled with seashells, suggesting he was part of a community dependent on the ocean for food. At first, nothing indicated how he died, but microscopic analysis revealed the presence of tiny algae called diatoms deep inside his bone marrow. This could only happen if he inhaled seawater with enough force that it ruptured the lungs and entered the bloodstream, meaning he drowned. The discovery raised even more questions when researchers realized 3 other people nearby died around the same time, including a woman and an infant. Strangely, none of them had diatoms, so they didn't drown. That created a mystery with several theories. Maybe a storm capsized a boat and he was the only one pulled under. Maybe he was diving when something went wrong. Or maybe the deaths happened separately but close together. Whatever the truth, his end showed how harsh life near the ancient coastline could be. And the final section reveals a story written into the skulls of early humans, the Trepan skull mystery. Across Europe, archaeologists uncovered dozens of Neolithic skulls with circular holes carved directly into the bone. These weren't injuries from weapons or accidents. They were the results of an early surgical procedure known as trepanation, where people used stone tools or sharpened shells to remove a piece of the skull. What puzzled researchers was how common the practice was, because nearly 10% of some ancient populations underwent the operation. Many skulls showed smooth edges around the holes, meaning the patients survived for months or even years after the procedure. The motivations remain debated. Some believe it was meant to relieve intense headaches, while others think it was used to treat head injuries or even spiritual conditions believed to cause sickness. But survival didn't mean comfort. Without painkillers, the procedure would have been agonizing. An infection was a constant threat, yet the number of healed skulls reveals unexpected medical skill and community support. The people performing these surgeries understood where to cut and how to avoid fatal bleeding, which is remarkable considering the tools they had. These skulls offer a glimpse into ancient resilience and resourcefulness, reminding us that humanity has always fought to survive, adapt, and understand the world around them. If you liked this video, consider watching this next one, which YouTube thinks you're going to love.